It doesn't matter at which iteration of Mordekaiser's lore you look, it was always about a brutal warlord who dominated the world. That's how he started, and I am happy to say that even after his rework, that part did not change. However, the details in his story are very different now, and although he was always a champion with amazingly rich history, with his rework, he lost a few pieces of his story along the way, but in return he gained some pretty cool new bits. So let's have a look at the brand new lore of Mordekaiser. The story begins thousands of years ago, with a name you have not heard before. San Uzal, a fierce warlord who rampaged across the northern lands. He crushed every tribe and settlement in his path, and in the end he forged an empire in blood and death. And he did it all in the name of a dark faith. When his mortal life was nearing its end, he took great satisfaction in knowing that all he had done would surely earn him a seat at the God's table, in the glorious Hall of Bones for all eternity. And yet, when he died, he found no halls of glory awaiting him. Instead, San Uzal ended up in an empty grey wasteland. There was nothing but fog and distant whispers around him. Occasionally, other lost souls drifted by, but they were nothing more than silent ghostly shapes. Anger consumed San Uzal, and he began to question reality. Had his faith been false? Or was his domination of the world not enough to please the gods and grant him immortality? Surely this empty oblivion could not be all there was. And yet, it felt that way. He watched as other spirits slowly faded into the fog, unmade and lost in time. But San Uzal refused to fade. His spirit was held together by his will, tempered by rage and torment, and all this time spent in that place gave him the opportunity to take in what surrounded him. Over time, the distant whispers turned into words he could almost comprehend, and he learned they were spoken in Oknun, a tongue not spoken by the living. Slowly, a plan began to form in what was left of San Uzal's mind. He began to whisper temptations across the veil between realms, promising his legendary strength to any who dared to listen. And sure enough, the day had come, and a group of sorcerers took the bait. They were resolved to bring San Uzal back from the dead. While his spirit was transferred into the material realm, it lacked strength. His spirit was weak, and so San Uzal told the sorcerers to bind him to dark metal armor crafted in the likeliness of his old blades. And that's how the Revenant of Iron and Hate was born. Of course, the sorcerers brought San Uzal back to use him as a weapon in their own wars. But instead, San Uzal slew them all where they stood. Before they perished, the sorcerers tried to quickly bind San Uzal to their will by screaming out his name. But the spell failed, for San Uzal was no more. The Iron Revenant used its spirit name in Oknun, Mordekaiser. And just like that, San Uzal, now known as Mordekaiser, began his second conquest of the mortal realm. Just like before, his ambitions were great, but this time he was empowered by dark magic. Up until now, Mordekaiser didn't have a material weapon, so using the damned souls of the sorcerers, he forged himself a mace fit for the Emperor of Death. The mace was called Nightfall. Over time, with those who remained loyal to him even after his death, Mordekaiser slowly started conquering Valoran. To his enemies, it seemed like all Mordekaiser wanted was massacre and destruction, and entire generations perished under his relentless campaigns. However, every single slain enemy had a reason, because there was far more to Mordekaiser's plan. Later, Mordekaiser raised the Immortal Bastion as the center of his empire. Not only did the Immortal Bastion serve as the seat of power, but few realized it was also hiding dark secrets. Mordekaiser hungered for all the forbidden knowledge of spirits and death, and a true understanding of the realm beyond. Fortunately, such tyranny could only bring enemies. And sure enough, in time, Mordekaiser was defeated. The Noxide tribes around the empire formed an alliance to overthrow the tyrant. On top of that, Mordekaiser was betrayed by his own inner circle. The members of this hidden cabal managed to sever Mordekaiser's spirit from his armor, and they sealed the empty iron shell away in a secret place. With that, Mordekaiser was banished from the material realm again. However, this time, he planned it. As we previously mentioned, all the massacre and destruction had a purpose. Domination and deceit had carried him far, but Mordekaiser knew of a destiny far greater than the one in the Hall of Bones. The wastelands of the Death Realm were previously empty, but now, all those who died during Mordekaiser's previous reign were here. All of them were bound by dark sorcery, and their spirits would never fade. The strongest of the spirits joined his eternal army, but even the weak were given purpose. Just like he forged a mace from the sorcerer's spirits, these weaker souls would become the building blocks of his new empire in the afterworld. Centuries have passed on Runeterra, and a new empire now known as Noxus took over the Immortal Bastion. There are very few who remember Mordekaiser and are still alive, but there are many who know about his dark reign by studying history. They all have one thing in common, however. They all fear that Mordekaiser might find a way to permanently return, and should he ever do so, there would be no way to stop him. This was Mordekaiser's bio. I liked how it explained the history of the Immortal Bastion, but it's a shame that we don't know that much about San Uzal when he was still alive. On the other hand, what's really awesome about Mordekaiser's new lore is that it was teased more than 8 months ago in Ezreal's story. One of Ezreal's stories talked about the Elixir of Yuloa, which is an elixir that is rumored to grant immortality. But in a different story called Curator's Gamble, Ezreal is trying to sell the elixir to get into the Explorers Guild. What is really interesting is that Janek, the guy who wanted to get the elixir from Ezreal, was actually secretly one of Mordekaiser's followers. He was a hidden acolyte, but we didn't know about that up until now. If you read the story again, not only may you remember the language called Oknun being referred there for the first time, but the Dreadlord Janek wanted to summon back with the help of the elixir was Mordekaiser. And all of this happened more than 8 months ago. Keep this in mind because Riot may already be teasing more reworks. We just may not know about it. Now, even though that is it for Mordekaiser's base story, Riot decided to keep his older short story because it is still relevant. Remember that even though Mordekaiser is in the Death Realm now, he can occasionally step into the Material Realm to claim more souls. He just can't permanently return without a physical vessel. So Mordekaiser can still come back during the Harrowing, for example. Even though the Black Mist and the Shadow Isles aren't just toys compared to the Realm of the Dead, he can still use the Black Mist as a way to appear on Runeterra. So now, let's quickly have a look at the older short story. The story takes place near a grey stoned castle, presumably near the regions of Demacia, but we didn't get more details. It was during the times when the Black Mist freely roamed around Runeterra. As the Black Mist slowly crept towards the castle, the Iron Revenant emerged from it, and he marched alongside the maze to the castle's gatehouse. Mordekaiser could see movement in the walls. They knew death had come for them, as the name Mordekaiser was whispered in fear. Suddenly an arrow sliced through the night, and a few more followed. They hit Mordekaiser, ricocheting from his armor. One managed to sink into the gap in Mordekaiser's helm, but it did not stop his march. A heavy iron gate protected the main wooden gate of the castle, but with a mere gesture of his hand, the metal gate bent to Mordekaiser's will, and he hurled it aside, revealing the heavy oak gate beyond. As Mordekaiser approached it, white runes burst to life upon the gate, forcing Mordekaiser to take a step back. The mist started roiling around him, and a few moments later, with a powerful swing, Mordekaiser brought down Nightfall to slam through the runes and shatter the gates. Inside the keep, there were dozens of garrison soldiers waiting for him, but in Mordekaiser's eyes they were all weaklings. He looked around, and finally his gaze stopped on a foe worthy of his attention. A silver-clad knight with a sword drawn approached him. Behind Mordekaiser, a few other evil souls came to form, but they wouldn't dare approach the knight and take a soul Mordekaiser desired. The Iron Revenant pointed at the knight and a blast of unholy magic shot forward. The knight's armor shone brightly for a second, and then dimmed down again. The knight stood unharmed, protected by Demacian steel. Next came another powerful swing with Nightfall. The knight managed to parry the blow with his sword, but the force brought him to his knees. The knight spun to the side and stabbed his sword in Mordekaiser's side. To a mortal it would be a deadly blow, but not to death itself. Another blow struck just above where Mordekaiser's heart would be, but there was no resistance from within. The blade sliced through the armor as if it was empty. Then Mordekaiser grabbed the knight by his throat and lifted him off the ground. The knight thought he could protect his people, but it would be him who would slay them all. Mordekaiser squeezed his grip to end the knight's life, and a few moments after his lifeless corpse fell on the ground, a new Dread Warrior rose. This new spirit would join Mordekaiser's eternal army. It is cool that Riot decided to keep Mordekaiser's older story canon. It shows the ruler side of Mordekaiser's personality. He is still the rightful king of the damned. He went to the other side, dominated that realm and came back. I still believe the Shadow Isles mean nothing to him. It is a mockery of the realm beyond after all. And I wonder if we ever get an interaction between Mordekaiser and the much weaker ruined king that should be somewhere around. Actually, maybe Mordekaiser already met him in the Death Realm. But either way, that would be a cool thing to see in the future. Right now, it is cool to finally see a great evil king in a fantasy world again. And Mordekaiser already reminds me of another great villain. Oh no, not that one. This is the one I meant. Hey, did you know that we have social media and Twitch where we talk about other League facts and stories? And did you know that we have neat mugs and shirts too? The links to all of that will be below. And as always, thank you, come again.